when it becomes a surprise to them, that's when it hits them and they start backtracking a little bit.
So is it important for the boiler to have a sticker on it saying when it was last serviced?
Prior to the inspection, I certainly think that's a good idea. I think it gives a lot of confidence for the buyer, as long as it's done right. And here's where it gets tricky. Oftentimes you get someone that comes out and does partial maintenance, meaning they didn't clean the stack. So we go and we open up the damper, and next thing you know, it's all dirty. Well, they didn't clean the boiler. Now they're even guessing, okay, I can't trust the maintenance guy and I can't trust the homeowners. So it can get a little tricky, but as long as they're thorough, they do a full cleaning and there is some history to it. And that's the next part. I think for homeowners, if you put a packet together with all the maintenance and all the upgrades you've done over the last couple of years, it really can lend to confidence building for the buyers.
All right. Sometimes it's the first home buyer and they're afraid that the
Yes.
house is going to fall apart on them or whatever.
Yeah.
So a furnace is a really big component of this whole
The
situation.
heating system certainly, heating and air conditioning today are very big. Number one, because of the expense. Number two, because people can't picture being in a house without heat or air conditioning.
To be honest, I have never had anyone who had had a home inspection prior to putting their house on the market. I am assuming then if the inspector, you know, you've done some upgrades or mechanical repairs to some unit
Yes.
at that point when you had a home inspector come in, then that could go in your booklet that shows that you maintained it. So then if their inspector says, well, the furnace has maybe 5 more years,
Yes.
so they have legitimate reason to say, you know what, you have 5 more years on the furnace. I know people who supposedly had 2 years on the furnace and it's 10 years later and the furnace is still running.
Right.
And with no problems.
Right.
So can they use that at that point?
Yeah, what I suggest to people is as they put this packet together, they have their home inspection report in there, and they've gone through all the components and chosen which ones that they're going to make changes to, adjustments
Okay.
to, maintain, whatever it is, and they put all those receipts in there with an explanation. We chose this, and we didn't choose this because. And you're right. For many reasons, oftentimes a boiler has a manufactured life of, let's say, 35 to 40 years. And it can go 60 years. What makes the difference? Well, oftentimes is it a open system, meaning you're introducing air constantly to it? Do you have water that's more corrosive than not?
Okay.
So there's a lot of variables involved in it, and manufacturer of the system can oftentimes come into play. And so all of these things are very important when we start talking about a system like the heating system.
All right. The next big one would be electrical.
Electrical system is a little bit tricky. It's not anything that can usually be maintained. You can do upgrades to it, such as ground fault circuit interrupters and where you're going to place those in the home. Arc fault circuit interrupters, that's the new requirement now for many of the codes in bedrooms and living areas. So do you upgrade the house to that or not? And these are things that you can pick and choose. Once you do that, then it's fairly inexpensive to upgrade
Right,
those.
yeah.
And having the electrical panel, the main circuit breaker panel, checked and evaluated, not by a homeowner, either by an electrician or a licensed home inspector, is very important.
Okay. Well, here's the loaded question. If you do an inspection beforehand
Yes.
for someone or after, what's the cost to the homeowner if he has you come in and do an inspection with a report so that he can look at the report and decide what items he's going to take care of beforehand?
Sure. And that's going to depend on the age and the size of the home. It could be anywhere from $400, let's say, on up to $1,000, depending on the size and age of the home,
Okay.
what's involved, and what they want inspected. But typically at the end, at least what we do is give them a spiral bound report that they can leave out for people to see. And again, it's a confidence builder, and it goes
They
with
have nothing
that
to
package.
hide.
That's
Sort
right.
of,
Yep.
all right. And then the cost of a home inspection is a little bit more money than that
Yes.
when you go through it.
Yes.
All right, because I know from experience that young people that I have buying homes, I always say, stick with Dave and he'll give you a million tips on how to fix things, how to do things. He's not an alarmist and he'll take care of all those things for you. So I think
Yeah.
it's important when they do not, sometimes they come in and they're socializing with their friends and their parents have come to look at the house, but they really should be following you around the house to see what they can learn about their new house.
Yeah, I like it when people come along with us because then we can educate them and show them what's going on right while they're there. And oftentimes they won't retain it, but that's the beauty of it. We want to be your inspectors for life. And what we do is we consider ourselves your home information center for life. So let's say they've been living in the house 5 years. And I had this a little while ago. A woman called me up and said, "Dave, do you remember my yellow bathroom?" Well, this was 6 years ago. I didn't remember the house, quite honestly. But I was able to answer her question
Yeah.
and help her out. And that's really what we do. No longer are inspectors just for real estate transactions. We are now there when you've got ice damming issues, when you've got plumbing issues, mold issues, and on it goes. Call us first because we know the house and we know the house dynamics, and we're best suited to be able to answer those questions before you bring a contractor in. We have nothing vested in that rate.
Okay. I'd like to talk about two other things, chimneys and roofs.
Yes.
Do you do the roof? Do
Yes.
you inspect the roof? All right. Do you go on the roof?
That's going to depend. It's going to depend on the home inspector. State standards say that we don't need to go on the roof, and most of the times you don't want to go on the roof, and the reason for that is because you can damage something if you're not careful.
Okay.
However, there are times that we need to go on the roof and be careful so that we can get to certain components, such as the chimney, as long as it's safe. What
Okay.
does safe mean? Well, if the ground is icy, if the ground is sloped in a way you can't safely put your ladder up there and get up on the roof, then you don't do it. If the roof is rain covered, snow covered, and moist,
not,
you
yeah.
don't get on
Okay.
it. And so those are the determining factors on that.
Because sometimes when we do inspections, we're not sure about the roof. Can you tell if it has 2 layers on it?
Many times we can, and there's a couple of ways to do that. One is on the outside. If the shingles can't lift and they've got a drip edge all the way around, then you can't see that. So you go to the inside and you look for double sets of nails, and that tells you that there are 2 layers
All right, so
there.
that's why it's important to get up into the attic also, because
Yes.
you could see some leaks.
Absolutely. That's half the inspection is the attic area.
And what about chimneys?
Chimneys will evaluate the best that we can from the areas that we have access to. Oftentimes, if we can't get up to it because it's a steep pitched roof or it's in an angle where we just can't get to it, then we're going to recommend a chimney contractor come out where they can build scaffolding and get up there safely
there, okay.
and look down it, because the interior liner is extremely important. But we'll look at the exterior
Do you
point.
look at the liner?
If we can get to it, we'll look as much as we can from the top side, which only gives you about 3 feet of access.
Okay.
It's not a lot. Then if you've got a fireplace, you look at it from the underside as well. So you have 2 places you can gain access. It only gives you about 3 to 6 feet of visibility to that liner.
But you think you can tell pretty much by that 3 or 6 feet?
Typically, you can tell a lot about it at that point. You
All
cannot
right.
always tell all the conditions, so that's when we'll recommend, if we think it's necessary, to put a camera down there.
All right, and then and that would be a chimney repair person?
Correct.
And then do you use binoculars to look at the chimney to see if the grouting has to be replaced or needs a new cap, or is that how you do that?
Oftentimes, we can do that if we can only see it from the ground. But if we can get to it from the ladder or get right up to it, that's even better. And we can tell a whole lot more about the flashing, about the mortar, about the crown, and the liner by getting up to it. So we try to when we can.
Did I use grout? I'm sorry,
That's
mortar.
all right.
I'm back in the kitchen. What can I say?
Yes.
Can you tell me about energy audits that are happening through the state?
Yeah, geez, that's a good question. There are so many people now that are doing energy audits, and we really have to be careful about what is an energy audit. There are lots of ways that they can be done, and again, there are 2 parts to that. One is the audit itself, and the audit is when they come in and do the evaluation.
All right, but who's doing these energy audits?
Well, there are some companies that will do an energy audit, and they are an energy auditing company. That's a private sector. Then you can also get them done by the utilities, natural
right,
gas
that's what I
or
was thinking.
Northeast
Yeah, all right.
Utilities.